Amazing. Okay. Really excited. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Connie, for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with Colorado Reach and about your organization and you and what you guys do. So I'll do my little introduction. I am Eliane. I am the program coordinator for Reach. I assist with webinars and trainings and events. To kick off our 2024 Reach Cultural Stories series, we are highlighting Asian Pacific Heritage Month. We have Connie Chung Jo here with us as a part of Asian Americans Advancing Justice out of the Southern California office. So Connie, I will pass it to you to give a little introduction to you, your organization, and all that good stuff.
Sure. Thank you so much, Eliana, and thank you for having me. So I am the CEO of Asian Americans Advancing Justice Southern California, or AJ SoCal. We are the nation's largest legal service and civil rights organization for the Asian Pacific Islander community. We have a structure within our what we call our affiliation. There are 5 independent nonprofit organizations that make up the brand Asian Americans Advancing Justice. So I run the Southern California affiliate, which has about 90 staff between Los Angeles and Orange County. We have an affiliate in the Bay Area called Asian Law Caucus. We have one in Atlanta called Atlanta. Chicago goes by Chicago. And our DC affiliate goes by Asian American Justice Center, or AAJC. So the 5 of us, although we're all separate nonprofits, we did come together under this common brand and name in order to have a national presence and coordination around addressing Asian Pacific Islander civil rights issues. So we often coordinate and work together on voting rights, immigrant rights. During the pandemic, with the rise in anti-Asian hate, that became a really major issue for all of us. So my organization, AJ SoCal, we focus on providing direct legal services and health access services to about 15,000 clients a year. We have helplines in 7 Asian languages and dialects to help our community members navigate different issues and needs. And then we have a impact litigation arm, which is sort of like the ACLU before the API community, to make systemic change. And then we have a policy unit that works really closely in California to address statewide policy issues.
Okay, amazing. What a great overview and a great organization. Again, so happy to have you here and speak on behalf of what you guys do every day. Anthony, happy to have you join us. Welcome in. I hope everything was smooth getting here. So thanks for popping in. Right now, we're just doing some self-introductions, a little bit about you, how you got involved with your organization, and then a little spiel about your branch.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. Sorry about the lateness. I had some trouble getting into the Zoom, but we're good now. My name is Anthony Pacheco, and I am a senior community organizer here at Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta. Shout out to the people out there in California, our affiliate groups too. I've been with the organization almost 6 years now, and the way that I got started was I was doing a lot of lobbying and also working as a legislative aide. So my background was like in campaigns, helping to elect first Asian American women and Latina women to the state capitol here in Georgia, and got connected with Advancing Justice, doing a lot of the work around anti-immigration bills and fighting against that. And pretty soon I decided to join them because I really loved the language access piece. I'm really just grew up in a household, immigrant parent household where, I had to like learn to translate things like, electricity bill or set up doctor's appointments, help my mom with their taxes and stuff like that, and translating that information at a really young age. And I think doing this as a career and helping people that speak multiple languages was the reason why I joined the organization. And yeah, I've been doing this for like a while now, so I really enjoy being here. And thank you.
Fabulous. Yeah, what a great personal to professional intersection as well. Again, happy to have you both. We are going to dive into the discussion questions here. I do want to open it to the audience as well. As you have questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box and we will be sure to address them. So thank you all for being here. I'm sure we'll get a couple more trickle in as time goes on as well. So, first question we have on the docket here is what initiatives or projects have you been involved in to strengthen the Asian Pacific community in your area? I know you guys have kind of focuses that you work on, but if there's any notable ones that you feel like are really worth mentioning, I would love to hear more about that, or initiatives that you're currently working on. So, Connie, I'll start with you.
Sure. This year, of course, being an election year, voting rights is really important. I know to Anthony's organization as well as to mine. The Asian Pacific Islander community is the fastest growing racial group in this country. And our political power has been growing as well, and representation is getting more and more important. And so we really feel like we need to make sure our community members are out there, they're able to vote, and voting speaks so loudly. In the 2020 elections, this was during the height of the pandemic. We had at the time a lot of rhetoric around things like, COVID was the China virus, Kung flu, these kinds of words that politicians would use that really put a target on the backs of so many Asian Americans and made us all look like we were to be blamed for what was happening. And so it really galvanized a lot of Asian Americans, especially I think younger progressive Asian Americans, to come out and vote in record numbers, especially in places like Georgia. I mean, Georgia was the epicenter of the action. And so I think the work Anthony's doing at Atlanta is so fantastic. So voting rights is huge for us, and getting our community members out there to vote. Uh, we are still very much worried about the rise in anti-Asian hate. And I think as we hear political rhetoric, again, with a lot of the anti-Chinese rhetoric, what happens is Americans have a hard time distinguishing what's happening overseas sometimes with the community members who belong to that ethnicity here. So when you hear a lot of, anti-Chinese rhetoric in political campaigns, unfortunately, we also hear about a rise in anti-Asian hate occurring here in the United States against people who are Americans, right? So that's a big issue that we're continuing to see, and we're actually monitoring online to track that as political campaigns, as we see debates. If somebody's doing a lot of anti-Chinese rhetoric during those debates, we're looking at in social media to see the patterns of increase in social media with anti-Asian hate as well. I think Anthony mentioned it. Language access is huge for our community. We are the most diverse racial group in this country when it comes to languages, religions, and we have a very high number of immigrant community members where English is not their first language. My parents were also immigrants. And so we really push that language access and making sure materials are available to our community members and our community members can be seen and heard is really important. I will say that for our organization, AJ SoCal runs a demographic research project. So we're taking the 2020 census data, breaking it down so people know what truly are the different characteristics of Asian Pacific Islanders. I think people often clump us and they think you guys are all just one big group, one monolith. And what's apparent is not only how do we have the most diversity between languages and religions and other kinds of backgrounds, we have the highest disparity between the haves and the have-nots when you talk about socioeconomic income. And I think it's really important that we show that because one, I think otherwise people sometimes believe in this model minority myth that all Asian Americans are the same and we are all kind of painted in this broad brush that you all are doing really well. And so you don't have any needs. You don't need support. And that's not true. And there are a lot of our community members who really are being impacted by different things, and we need to show that. And the other problem with that model minority myth is it's often used as a way to say, well, Asian Americans, you guys are doing so well. That makes you different than other communities of color. And when that happens, it creates a wedge between our community and other communities like the Black and Brown communities. And in fact, all of us have certain unifying struggles of things like, racism that we face, different kinds of needs that don't get met. And it breaks us apart in our ability to work together when you paint us in that broad brush. So we work on a project, we're putting it together on a website called the Asian Resource Hub. where you'll be able to see, um, in more detail, what's the difference between Chinese and Laotian and Samoan communities across this country? What are the disparities between income and high school attainment rate? And I think people who don't know our community that well are often very surprised when they really start to see that.
Absolutely. And it's important to identify those differences and also similarities between marginalized communities and to make the progress there. So absolutely. That sounds like a really amazing hub that you guys, is that active now?
It will be launched. We have something right now, but it's actually we did a soft launch, but we're actually going to be launching it in a big way, probably end of February or beginning of March. And this
Okay,
is the
cool.
asianresourcehub.org. It will have also lots of stories around how anti-Asian hate happened, and you can track the numbers and hear the stories. But then what's really great about it is the site's going to be translated into, not only is it available in English, but it'll be available in Chinese, Korean, and Vietnamese, which are sort of the top languages of our community. And and folks will be able to see, how can I get services that are catered to me? So if I live in Montana and I'm looking for mental health and counseling
Yeah.
services available in, let's say, Vietnamese, I can actually use this hub to filter in those ways and find services and organizations that have been vetted already to get that support.
Wow, that is so amazing. I am really looking forward to that. I'll have to check out what you guys have right now, but yeah, definitely let us all know when that goes live because that's a very amazing hub to put out there and much needed. Absolutely. Anthony, I'll pass the same question to you. I don't know if you want to touch on similarities. Obviously, I know same overarching organization, but you guys handle different things and different initiatives. So if you want to touch on anything you guys are actively working on or some notable things you guys have done, please feel free to share.
Yeah, I mean, I will start off by saying, I'm not Asian American myself, but I really care about like what's happening in my community, and our community is very diverse. Like Connie mentioned, the Asian American community is not a monolith, and especially living here in Gwinnett County, it's the most ethnically diverse county in the entire Southeast. And living here all my life, I think has been uh really good in seeing like the work that I'm doing here. And here at Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta, we're working on different like multiple fronts. First of all, language access is really important for us, and we're trying to expand that at the polls. We've been able to get at least sample ballots translated in 5 different languages: Spanish, Korean, Chinese, Mandarin, and I forget the other language, but yeah, we're trying to get that even at the polls too. Like in Gwinnett County, there's a huge population of Korean Americans, and we're trying to make sure that people can vote in their designated language, which is really important. And that sort of like gets rid of like a lot of fears or barriers that people would otherwise not be able to vote. And I think that's super important. On other, we've had some issues where we've had to deal even with, like the maybe you've heard of the Atlanta spot shootings that happened a few years back, and we had to come up with ways to respond to like what's happening in the community, and even like helping source like resources for mental health, um, helping the families directly that were impacted by that. And that was a good way to bring the community together. So we have like really great, robust, rapid response programs as well. And I think those are like the big major wins that we've been working on. So I think for us, it's like we're kind of used to being like so reactive in our work, but we're trying to shift into being more proactive and also empowering our Asian American communities.
Yeah, that's great. And access to the polls, that language access, that barrier, breaking that down is so important, going off of kind of what Connie mentioned about having voters out there is so important to continue good work, especially in the arenas that you guys are in. So fabulous. Thank you both for sharing. Going off of the Asian hate movement and how we're kind of seeing obviously negative effects of that. Given the rise of anti-Asian incidents, how has your organization actively addressed and combated anti-Asian hate? Connie, I'll start it again with you.
Sure. I mean, this is an issue that is deeply, deeply personal to our organization and to me. I started at AJ SoCal in August of 2020 in the height of the lockdown because of the rise in anti-Asian hate. I had been working as the executive director of another Korean-specific social service organization at that point for 11 years. I loved my job. I had no intention of ever leaving. And I certainly wasn't looking to go to a legal organization. I had been a recovering attorney. I had practiced for 7 years, and I was like, I'm never turning back. I'm never going to go back to the legal field. But what happened with this opportunity was our founder had retired. The organization was looking for someone new to take over. They approached me 4 times because the first 3 times I said, no, no, thank you. But what changed was the pandemic. The board reached out to me, the pandemic had hit. And when I saw at the beginning of the lockdown how our community members were being targeted and attacked, and no one knew about it in the mainstream world because mainstream media wasn't covering it. If you were Asian, you knew because you feared what was happening to your family members or to yourself, but people didn't seem to care outside of our community in the beginning. And then we had the murder of George Floyd, and through the Black Lives Matter movement, there was this public reckoning in this country around racism and systemic racism. And we were having this public discourse on this topic in a way that I'd never seen before. And I'd started my career as an ACLU attorney back, in the early 2000s. And at that time, I was this young, idealistic, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed young, civil rights lawyer thinking that we would change the world. And we couldn't even talk about privilege and racism, in close quarters. And so I started to feel this real urge and this pull that there's this conversation happening in race about around race in this country right now. And I didn't feel like I could stay away from it. And, I talk about how I also thought about what we were seeing during the pandemic around Black Lives Matter, anti-Asian hate, and the pandemic itself and being on lockdown. This was history in the making. In our country, there is no doubt that my kids and future generations are going to have a chapter in every US history book moving forward about COVID-19 and what all of these themes meant. And I thought to myself, when future generations get to that chapter and my kids or my grandkids ask me, what was it like, living through all of this? I felt like I needed to say I was doing something to be part of the solution. And so for that reason, it was important to me to go to what was the largest API civil rights organization in the country. And to be able to say that I have that role and to be able to make some impact was really important. So, I mentioned we have helplines in 7 Asian languages and dialects. It is the largest Asian network of languages being offered to address needs, including anti-Asian hate. We offer something called bystander intervention trainings. And throughout our affiliation, the 5 of us, there have been over 175,000 people in this country who've taken bystander intervention training. And I would encourage your audience to think about it as well. If you're thinking, what can I do just as a regular person to, be an ally or combat anti-Asian hate? This training is a 1-hour Zoom training where you learn a little bit about the history of anti-Asian hate, including, the forever foreigner myth and how Asians are often scapegoated as being not trustworthy or blamed for things when they happen in this country. And you learn what's called the 5 Ds, which are the 5 strategies that you can use should you witness an Asian American being harassed or targeted, and how you can use these strategies to intervene, but in a way that keeps you safe and comfortable. So we have this whole PSA on it that Ken Jeong, the comedian, narrated for us. But the training itself is really, I think, a good way for people who think, I want to show my allyship and support and do something about anti-Asian hate in a tangible way. And create a community that's safer for Asian Americans.
Absolutely. And I think what everyone can sometimes get caught up in is if you don't identify with a certain race or identity or sexuality, it's not my problem to deal with. And that's a super not productive misconception that we can get stuck in. It's this community, therefore it's their issue to deal with. So having resources like that bystander program is so great. It's learning, as you kind of mentioned, how you as an individual, whether you do affiliate yourself as a member of a certain community or not, how can I continue to be an ally? And the whole safety component of it is so important. I love that. I definitely will be sure to do that myself and share that with our audience. I think that's really important. So, so nice that you guys have that. Anthony, is there anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us here, living in the South, Atlanta is the cradle of the civil rights movement, and for us, new generations that are popping up, immigrant families, we definitely take into account that our work is intersectional. If it's affecting one person, it's affecting all of us. And the Black Lives Matters, the Asian hate, those are important movements that we've had to come together and be as one in trying to fight a lot of those things. And I think what's maybe like unique to Georgia is like those things are happening also even in the in the legislation. There's like legislation that's trying to get passed where they were saying that Chinese nationals couldn't buy land within a certain distance of like a military field or airspace field, something like that. And so for us, that's where a lot of that rhetoric is happening also in our like local laws and state legislation here in Georgia. So for us, I think we've been really proactive in trying to not give or not play into that misinformation that even our legislators are working.
Absolutely. Kind of going off of the whole intersection aspect, how do you guys see other identities such as gender, sexuality, socioeconomic status, and others? How do you see that intersect with the Asian Pacific identity? And what intersections do you feel like support and or further marginalize the Asian Pacific community that you serve? Anthony, I'm actually going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us here at Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta, I get to see that every day in our staff. We have people in our executive roles who identify as LGBTQIA and are also Asian American themselves. And so for me, I think that's something that's admirable and really important to have like presence. Like presence is super important in every type of like industry and working field. And for us, I think that's super important to have like that presence in our own community as well, in our own leaders too, who can relate to like those issues or who have like a personal experience from that. Even working with colleagues who are identified as Asian American, also reclaiming their identities, right? In that intersectional stuff as well with being queer and Asian American. I got to see a lot of that here in the diverse staff that we have in that I guess many of them like in their like Asian American households like their identity was like suppressed, but working here I feel like they were able to reclaim that like I'm proud to be Korean American or I'm proud to be Chinese American, and I think that's something that many of the staff members came here with that intention of trying to rediscover who they are, what their immigrant background is like.
For sure. And the power in reclaiming those identities and being able to hear your colleagues or people that you meet in your daily lives, the storytelling aspect is so powerful. Hence a big reason why we do this webinar. It's all about education based on storytelling. And I think that goes a really long way. So I love that. Fabulous. Connie, I'll pass that same question over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me as a woman of color, I really think about the intersections a lot about particularly for me, it's race and gender. And I've really tried to bring that forward in our organization because before me, our founder, who started the organization in 1983, was the only chief leader of our organization until I started. So, and he's male. And so I came in very much strongly saying I am not only Asian American, but I am a woman and I run the organization as somebody who is a professional mom, as a woman of color. I will also say it was really important to me that our organization lean in more at the intersections of race in the LGBTQ community as well, where I don't think there is as strong sometimes of leadership as I felt there needed to be. So, for example, when the Dobbs decision came down from the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade, we really thought about how do we talk about this in our community. And it's a controversial topic. Obviously there's a lot of folks who have a lot of different feelings about it, but we thought it was really important to show up and show what does this decision mean for Asian American and Pacific Islander women, and also especially for immigrants. So we translated a lot of terminology into our 7 Asian languages where we do our work, because some of these terms are not, well defined. And also we made sure we framed our message that was supportive towards the LGBTQ community. So we didn't talk about just the impact on women. We talked about the impact of those with reproductive organs. And it was very complicated when you're talking about words and language in in languages where these ideas aren't really well developed, or they're highly stigmatized. Finding the right vocabulary is often incredibly difficult, and it's very controversial. And so it was almost like mucking through, like wading through mud, trying to figure out and define what seems like simple concepts or simple terms into other languages. But we thought it was important to do that. I will also say, when after the Atlanta spa shootings and during the height of anti-Asian hate, we saw a lot of support financially coming into our organizations who are doing the work on the ground. And with a lot of the funding we got in our proposals, we would say we're going to do work in interracial coalitions. We want to do work with Black and Brown and other communities as we work to address racial justice. And I was still relatively new in the organization, and I had a hard time figuring out what do those interracial coalitions really look like. I'm part of a lot of different interracial groups, but I didn't feel like I had a strong tie with some of the organizations. So we ended up starting a group called Sisterhood Trust, and it's made up of women of color leaders from the preeminent social justice organizations here in Los Angeles. So the top female women leader, female executive, women of color executives from organizations like Community Coalition, which was founded by Mayor Karen Bass, Kadesan, which is a Central American Resource Center, Khmer Girls in Action, which works with Cambodian women, and Trans Latina Coalition, which is an organization for trans women who are Latina. And we formed our own leadership network and professional group. And for me, that's my safe space, being with other women of color. I feel at most at home, and that's where I can build the most trust. So when I'm trying to address a sensitive, difficult issue, working with these women who I think are really exceptional people, make it so much easier for me to do. And I think it's far more effective. And I think, there was a woman named Bell Hooks, who is a Black feminist, who talked about this idea of bringing margin to center. And so the idea of taking the most marginalized members of community, centering their experiences in your work. If you can center your most marginalized communities, then the other less marginalized are going to be so much easier to do. But we have a responsibility to reach out to those who face the most challenges and most barriers, and to lift them up. And as a principle, that means those intersectional groups, those who are undocumented and limited English speaking and queer or trans, or, as well as being Asian Pacific Islander, they're the ones who need their rights protected the most. And so those are the ones we're going to aim to serve.
Absolutely. And identifying, being a part of those coalitions, understanding the intersections of identity is so important, not only to be with members who may have had similar experiences as you, but also learning from experiences that you may not have had, hearing stories, and trailblazing those intersections. You said it was called the Sisterhood Trust. Is that your guys' name for it? Is that an official kind of organization? How would you qualify that, I guess?
That is just our organization's name for it. It is just, really kind of a very informal network of professional women of color leaders in Los Angeles that we just have been doing this together. And so we think it's a great model, and we hope others, and whenever I talk about it, other folks are like, that's great. I'd love to do something similar. But it's nothing like formally structured, but
Yeah.
it's been a really, really valuable space for me in my leadership.
Absolutely. That's very cool and very empowering. I mean, as a woman myself, I completely understand how being around like-minded, powerful women like that, it's a contagious environment. So fabulous. All righty. I know you mentioned funding a little bit and how that can help, but how do you guys both think individuals and organizations can contribute to build a more supportive and connected Asian Pacific community? Anthony, I'll start with you again.
Yeah, I think for us, what we try to do is um, also engage the community like socially. Like we like to put our money back into the community. And um, just yesterday, we created
Uh-oh, I think we lost him there for a second. Hopefully he'll pop back in. Okay, well, for now, Connie, I'll
and
pass that. Oh, there, you're back, you're back. Start over.
oh, okay,
Start over.
gotcha.
Sorry, we lost you. No, get going again.
Yeah, so what I was saying is that just yesterday we hosted this big event. There was over 100 people that attended to showcase our launch party, our campaign launch party. And we had our canvassers who are out in the, they go out in the field every day. And here it's getting colder, almost like 20 degrees weather, and also in the hot summer weather. But we wanted to give the opportunity for the canvassers to also highlight the work that they're doing, and for also the community members to help with like donations, or if they also wanted to get involved. And we had like an open bar. We had somebody that came out to bring food as well, a local vendor that we support. So I think that's really important. Is also some other ideas that we've created too, is like we bring high school students from different areas, and we're like, hey, we want to like know, what are y'all thinking? What are some community events, or what things do y'all care about that maybe we can support? And we invite them out for like a boba. And I think that's really important. It's just like, I guess, putting the money that we receive back into the community, and doing like things that might be our like socially, obviously talking about difficult things and issues and um uh social issues as well. But I think it's important to also put like that human aspect, that interaction, that relationship building. It goes a long way, because then what we have is people supporting the work that we do. Um,
For
yeah, that's
sure. Yeah, I mean, relationship development is so key. And I love that you're doing that with youth as well. I think that's super important. I mean, I feel it's a hard line to understand how we can communicate with youth and sometimes make what's happening in our world make sense. So to engage them, at an early age, even if it's just simply building a relationship with them, letting them know that they're supported, that's super important. So, Connie.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's some of the things we've already been talking about. I mean, beyond donations, where look, Anthony and I will take anyone's money any day of the week to support the work we do. But I think it's things like raising awareness and getting trained on things, whether it's bystander intervention training, whether it's learning more about Asian American history and understanding, when we talk about this forever foreigner myth, what does that mean? Why are Asian Americans so sensitive to this idea that we're not being scapegoated? And the reason is because if you learn your history, Asian Americans were scapegoated in this country all the time, with the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, World War II with Japanese American incarcerations, 1983, the killing of Vincent Chin in Detroit, Michigan, the 9/11 with the treatment of those of South Asian, Middle Eastern, Muslim descent. I mean, it happens over and over again that when America feels threatened by war, by disease, by national security issues, by economic challenges, often as a country, we turn our eyes towards Asian Americans and we say, you are the ones we're going to blame. And it's because this feeling that Asian Americans aren't ever truly American enough. Right. And and I mean, it's why you heard so many people being told, go back to your country if you were Asian American during the pandemic. My own father-in-law, who is a American-born US citizen from Texas who fought in the Vietnam War and was decorated for his service to this country, was told, go back to your country when he was walking his dog down the street in Los Angeles. And we have so many stories about that. There's no way for Asian Americans that were ever seen as being American enough. And that's one of the issues. And that's why right now, when people say, oh, Chinese people, you're not to be trusted, you're all spies. And then that gets turned in people's minds that Asian Americans, you are doing that as well. And so I do challenge people to make sure and your history and you understand these kinds of themes and stereotypes, and you be careful not to feed into them. I also think this is why voting is insanely important. Look, I hated voting when I was younger. I just thought it was a waste of time, and I didn't want to bother learning about who all of these candidates are, right? And I'm in California. I know exactly where the vote's going to go. I know where all the delegates are going to go. So I always felt like my vote didn't matter. That is not true at all, because those candidates pour through every talking point they have and they look at what resonates with the voters or what people seem to be listening to. And if voters say, we don't support a candidate who is going around talking really badly about Asia or Asians or China and really demonizing Asian Americans, that will resonate with other candidates as well. And so we're working very hard to make sure that voters go out there and put a voice. And I think that's both important for Asian American voters as well as for others who want to show their allyship to the Asian American community. Do not vote for candidates who focus on using divisive language or hatred to motivate. I think there's a theme that some people like to say, this is a bad person, we need to protect our own. And I think that is when we get in trouble as a country with like racism and racial injustice and the targeting of other marginalized communities.
Perfect. Yeah, voting is essential. And I mean, the crisis that we deal with voters dropping off, the lack of voters that we see, it's super important to keep reinstating how important that is. So I hear you there. Kind of going into further supporting the Asian American community, I guess this can be personally or professionally, but what have you guys both found to be the most effective ways to raise awareness about social justice issues affecting Asian Americans? I know we see a lot of positive traction with voting, but how do you raise awareness? What are your most effective strategies? And I guess what would you suggest to organizations listening on how to promote awareness? Anthony, I'll start with you again.
Yeah, I think similarly to what I was saying about like the social events or putting like the human aspect to like the work that we're doing is definitely supporting like the youth, right? I think that's super important, and also bringing them into like our community. We have a community room here, and we always try to bring in groups and do like political education, voter information. That's really important, and in preferred languages too. So like I mentioned, we serve at least 5 different languages, and we want to make sure that everybody is informed, and that's really important to be more civically engaged. From, we also have a legal department here that does a lot of work on detention work, people who get stopped by the police and end up in those horrible immigration prisons. But also like maybe it might be somebody who is a newly naturalized citizen, right? We don't just stop there. We want them to get registered to vote, and then get out there to vote and also participate in the whole election process, and also be involved with their local government, local municipal government, the county commissioners here. Go to those meetings, go to the Board of Elections meetings, just fostering those types of habits of being more involved. and maybe even running for office too. That's something that we've seen in our communities where people have been stepped up, and finally we have representatives that look just like us as well and who understand those issues or who grew up here as well. And it's not just another politician that is making decisions that doesn't put the opinion of like the rest of the or only in certain types of people or groups. So I think it's important, like I said, voter education and also political education. Those things are crucial in trying to I would say like keep our work sustainable and also investing in like the younger generations because they are the ones that are getting like more exposed to, I believe that like when I was growing up, I didn't have Twitter or I was not actively involved. And I feel like a lot of them are like involved like on social media because of all the information they receive and just finding ways, opportunities where they can get involved in person, going out to protest or setting up rallies, going to the local uh, board of elections meetings or maybe if they want to do some public commentary, stuff like that. We try to get our youth to be more involved in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And, education through access, making sure it's accessible. You going out to the students is huge and creating a space for them to even come to you. I think also something that, I even think of as a young professional sometimes, but forgetting how much your voice matters. I know a lot of youth, obviously they can't vote yet being under 18, but knowing that when you are 18, your voice matters, your voice is heard. It's not just, oh, this was happening before me and it will happen after me. Nope, you are a big part of this and continuing to remind them of their impact. That's very important. Connie, is there anything else that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think social media is incredibly important. It is a powerful tool for disinformation and misinformation when it's used incorrectly, but it's also a great way to be aware of what's going on. And so if you want to know what's going on with the Asian American Pacific Islander community and what are some of the issues or other communities, you can follow certainly and AJ's robust Twitter, um, accounts. We just started TikTok too. And so those would be ways to kind of find out. And I do agree with Anthony's point about local civic engagement. So people locally can get involved. If you are a young parent who is an immigrant and doesn't speak English well, there's no reason why you couldn't get involved with your local elementary school for your kids and speak up and try to get civically involved that way. And I think that kind of local engagement is actually really important. Or your neighborhood, council. I think people underestimate the amount of influence these local governments and local structures have. Your federal government is not making the decision about whether streets are clean, whether there's your schools are, your local elementary school is going to have the books it needs. Those are all local decisions. And I think it's incredibly empowering for people to be civically engaged and active in their communities at whatever level they feel comfortable.
Absolutely, and reminding everyone that there is a role for them to play, again, knowing that it may not be at the highest level, but every level does have its impact from the ground up. So continuing to reinforce that, super important. All right, next question is, what are your hopes and aspirations for the future of Asian Pacific communities in the United States? Where have you guys seen wins? Where would you like to see more wins? I want to hear from both of you on this. Anthony, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I think for us here at Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta, we obviously want voter access, voter equity, voter inclusion in our Asian American communities. So we're actively working to expand that in different counties. And, ideally, I would like to see that here in the entire state of Georgia where, people can vote in Korean, people can vote in Vietnamese, people can vote in Chinese or Mandarin specifically. And the way that we've been trying to bridge that or get to that point is we have a whole voter hotline where people can call. And if they have questions about voting, we can connect them to somebody that speaks their preferred language. and I think that has helped a lot in as you see like in the 2020 election. Every year it just gets there's just more and more Asian Americans coming out to vote. So it's a growing demographic group or voting block that's important, that's crucial, and that the elected officials are taking notice of on both sides. So it's important that that also that voters are well informed. We also use a tool called Branch that's completely nonpartisan, but gives voters information on the candidates, what positions they take on. Because people ask us as all the time, like, who should I vote for? And obviously, we're a nonprofit, we're nonpartisan. We care about the voting, but we're not going to obviously tell anybody like who to vote for. That's something that's sacred, important, and their own decision. But at least we can provide them like a guide that gives them, candidate information, and they're able to make a more informed decision when it comes to at the polls. And we also have translated that in 5 different languages, and we're including other languages like Urdu and Hindi too. Um, and so I think using technology to help with like language access and equity is super important, and that's probably where I see like the next wave of things happening, where people can be able to feel free to express themselves in their own language and also make that vote.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you kind of touched on before, seeing more Asian Americans in office in different legislative branches, having that representation, I look forward to that as well. Connie, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We need more Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in elected office. We're underrepresented there. I'll also say we're underrepresented in the boardrooms and C-suite positions of Fortune 500 companies, and those are very powerful roles. And there's not enough of us there. I think as our community is so rapidly growing, I look forward to a world in which we are accepted as part of the American fabric. And I think still Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders were sometimes seen as not quite American enough. And we're still sort of seen as an afterthought. We think about other communities first. And I see this happen all the time. People talk about racial justice issues, equity issues, and they remember the Black and Brown communities, but they forget the Asian Pacific Islander communities. And we're often saying, hey, we're here too. We need to talk about how racism affects us, talk about how disparities impact us. And I'm looking forward to a world in which we are accepted as part of the true American fabric and not seen as an afterthought. And I think that's gonna take both that influence and power when we're in enough roles and positions of power to do that, as well as our numbers continuing to grow.
Absolutely. And being in, like you mentioned before, your coalitions, being around the people that will help you and, Asian American individuals to get to those higher positions where they can have more influence, so important. So hear you there. All right, last question that we'll end with today, you guys, is do you have a book, magazine, podcast, tool, or technique that you would recommend to the audience so that they can continue their learning when it comes to allyship towards the Asian Pacific community? This can be something that's affiliated with your organization, something outside of it, whatever you choose to tell us. Definitely resources are a big part of something that I want to continue to promote on behalf of you guys in the work that you do. So please share. Anthony, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll drop it in the chat, but basically it's like our there's a QR code that whenever we're out at the doors talking to people, you can scan that, and then that's the biggest like voter resources that we have here in the state of Georgia. It's bit.ly/AAJ vote, and I'll make sure to write that down as well. And what's really great about that is people use that in you can obviously select it in English, but the first screen that you'll see is like what's your preferred language, and you'll have at least 5 different languages there. And there's frequently asked questions about what to do at the polls, like what IDs you should bring, like that basic information. And also it's been vetted to by our attorneys on staff that deal with voting rights as well. We also have a tracker on there that you can follow, part of our like legislative issues that we really care about, and more resources as community resources too. I believe we're going to also, since we focus mostly on immigrant rights and voting rights, we've come across community members that are experiencing other issues like, healthcare. Maybe they need some assistance with like housing too. And so we created a map where people can come to the website and be able to click and see the different resources in different places of the Metro Atlanta area. So I think for us, that's probably going to be like the next part. It's trying to integrate more of like the social issues that people are interested in. And our wheelhouse is definitely voting rights and immigrant rights work, but intersectional work is really important with other issues as well.
Perfect. Yes. And just to our viewers, I will be creating a resource graphic that will be shared as well with everything that Anthony and Connie will share with us today. So thank you for that, Anthony. Connie, I'll send it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think to stay abreast of what's happening, following, Advancing Justice Atlanta or Advancing Justice SoCal on Instagram or Twitter is a good way of staying up to date with what's moving forward. I think if you want some baseline information about the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities, there's a couple sources like there's an Asian American curriculum site called the Asian American Education Project, and they have a whole slew of different online modules and videos you can see to understand the history of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. If you're not much of a like classroom curriculum style kind of online learning type of person, there's a PBS series called Asian Americans that you can just watch that I think has some really fascinating background stories if TV's more your medium. I don't know. I mean, there's great books too, but I'm not as much of a reader, so I'm not going to go into all of those. I mean, I think it really is um, trying to figure out how do you um, how do you just like stay connected with people who are of different communities than your own is, I think, really important. It's really easy for me to get information about Asian Americans from friends, families all around me. There are social media sites like Nextshark that is an Asian American media site that is good. But I think when you need to find out how to find out about other communities that are not like yours, where you're going out of your comfort zone, um, I think that's the more challenging piece. And I think that's where, having connections with real people is the most important than any tool or resource or book out there.
Absolutely. Relationship building is the key to prosperity in so many organizations and just everybody's daily life. Human connection and again, storytelling is really important. So I do want to end this by saying thank you both so much. This was an amazing way to kick off our 2024 series. You both gave us incredibly valuable insight. I can't thank you enough for your time and effort, and know that we reach can, if there's anything we can do to continue to support your organization, please feel free to share that with me. Know that I will continue to be in touch with our viewers and pass anyone who's looking to get in touch with you guys along. But thank you both so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Bye, you guys. Thanks to
Bye.
everyone watching.